And we'll ask Mr. O'Hare, Comrade O'Hare, if he would like to just start the meeting. And at your pleasure.
I shall do it, yeah.
Best order, please.
Okay, we'll just do a wee screen share here. So thanks very much for asking me along, folks, to speak to you today, and thanks also for sorting out the IT for me, which seems to be working. My name's Gerry O'Hare. I'm a cancer nurse. I've worked for Glasgow and Clyde Health Board for a long time, mostly at the Vale of Leaving, dealing with breast cancer and lung cancer, and working at the Beatson for the last 2 years, cut back my hours a bit, and still doing what I enjoy most, which is focusing on managing patients.
Could you hold on a minute? Somebody's got their wireless on or something. On Zoom. Quiet, please.
Hold on, I'll get just
mute.
I think that's it. I think it was John Beckett. Right.
So,
Sorry about that.
thanks for asking. So I'm going to share with you just a bit of my experience. I've been working supporting cancer nurse over in Gaza and the West Bank for the last 14 or 15 years. I'm going to tell you a bit about the background to that, how I get involved, and a bit about the exchange that I've been involved in for the last 7 or 8 years of bringing cancer nurses, postgraduate cancer nurses who are trained in the West Bank, who are doing the postgraduate diploma in cancer nursing, or masters in cancer nursing it is now, at Bethlehem University, that I was involved in at the start of, and just a bit more about what the impact of working with my friends, my colleagues, both in the West Bank and Gaza, has the impact really it's had on me. This is an audience that, right, okay, I'll move.
Okay, I'll do it.
No, is it that there, or no?
Yeah.
It's not.
Do you want this one?
Is it just that?
Do you want this one?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I can make it big if you want. I could make it. Can I make it? Here's the large, the full screen one, rather than just the ones at the sides.
I know. I'm just trying to get.
It's just a wee stand one.
From Stark.
That's it. Okay, excellent. Right, there we go. So anyway, this is an audience that I'm sure I don't have to show you this screen. I give this, I talk to groups of people who maybe don't have an awareness, sorry I'm in your way there, don't have an awareness of the impact that the occupation has had on the landmass of Palestine since 1946. So this is there I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about my the support, my involvement in cancer care, both with Medical Aid for Palestine and with Bethlehem University, and for patients and nurses and health workers who have to travel between all of these areas. You'll know there are now 600 checkpoints in the West Bank, a tiny wee area, and you should be aware of Gaza, the size of the island of Rum, in fact, with 2.2 million people, probably about 150,000 less than there was 2 years ago. Due to the invasion and the bombings. So I'll just talk, I've told you what I'm going to chat about. So there are different ways you can advocate. I'm a nurse and I know more about nursing, I think, than, well, hopefully more than anything else, but there are different ways that you can advocate for Palestinian rights and health. I'm sure many of you in the room are involved. Just being here in itself is an involvement. Flying the Palestinian flag is an act of resistance, both in this country to an extent, but certainly over in the West Bank and Gaza. Flying a Palestinian flag is tantamount to asking to be attacked either by settlers or by the IDF or by others. You know, you can march the streets. This is Graham Watt, and this is Salah, who's was a great friend. Salah has died. He was here on the Ida camp, which is an art centre in the West Bank in Bethlehem, in Ida refugee camp, and he came over and stayed with us many years ago, before I went over to the West Bank with a group. So how did I get involved in it? We've got 4 sons. This is Liam O'Hare, this is my oldest son Patrick O'Hare. And Liam, when Liam was a student at Edinburgh Uni, he was an international student. He had already been over in activism in the West Bank, and he had a programme where he took students over to try and experience what it might be like living under occupation. Obviously difficult to do unless you know, but he would have an alternative tour almost. Sure, he would do he would do the holy sites and the attractions, but he would take them to the apartheid wall. He would take them to the refugee camps. He would take them to the Bethlehem University and the struggles for training and education caused by the occupation. And he reluctantly invited me. I was like, I kind of pushed for it, but he said, "Dad, it's all young guys, it's all young people, it's my pals from the university." But he did concede and let me go. I was the youngest, the oldest guy by a while. I hung about with this guy who was nearer my age, but he was the bus driver, so he we had a bit more in common there. But it was an introduction for me. You don't need to say this. You don't need to go over to Palestine to be active to make a difference. But I had the opportunity to go over, and also a nurse. So before I went over, I contacted the Dean of Nursing at Bethlehem University, Mariam Awad, who I texted this morning, who's a great friend, to say, how do you deliver healthcare, how do you deliver cancer care? I was interested. The other people in the group were doing other stuff, and we shared stuff, and then I contacted the senior doctor and the senior nurse, Omar, at Augustus Victoria, which is in occupied East Jerusalem, to say this is a cancer hospital that has to cater for cancer patients in the West Bank, but you need a permit to get in there. How do you manage that? And surprisingly, I was surprised, they said, yes, come and meet us and we'll tell you, but you tell us about your working life, because we don't really get to hear that much. We don't see too many people. Said to them, what would make a difference? I said, they asked me, could I go over and do some teaching? I said, I'm happy to do that. And I'd be delighted if some of the health workers, the Palestinian workers, could do that, which they did, but they really wanted to know a bit about, how we manage cancer. And you can kind of, it's a generalisation. You might not have all of the resources, but cancer management isn't always about resources and money. It's how you spend it and how you use it wisely. So you can generalise cancer care. So it did. Bethlehem University is a great place to train to be a nurse. Cancer is a major health issue in the West Bank. There is no postgraduate training in the West Bank. So the nurses had a thirst for knowledge. They wanted to develop their skills. They wanted to improve the quality of care for their patients. So Noelle O'Rourke, who's a pal of mine, she's a consultant at the Beatson, who I knew well, and asked her if she would come over with me. And somebody thought what looks like a Ukrainian flag looks better than me behind the screen there. That's me. So we went over and we thought this is fine, and we got a great reception. It kind of confirmed the thirst for knowledge. It was a 2-day conference we arranged. People came from all over, not just nurses, but it was a multidisciplinary team. And I thought, well, we could do this again, but in fact, and I brought a nurse over to go on placement, but if we're going to make a difference, so Mariam Awad, who's the Dean of Nursing, said, well, we could come over once a year, be delighted to do that, but if we're really going to make the impact we want, you need to have a postgraduate diploma so that you can train the nurses, so that not just the chosen few get to come over, but you can develop the skills. And we both agreed on this. But we didn't know how we would do it because there wasn't any postgraduate training, although cancer was a big issue. And I could go on, this took 2.5 years, but essentially things kind of fell into place. We needed to have a curriculum. There's an organisation called the European Oncology Nursing Society, which is a resource-rich organisation in Europe, and Palestinians, and Palestine isn't a part of it, but it puts on courses, weekend courses, travel grants, research grants, online teaching, and it has a diploma as well. It has a curriculum for a diploma which we used, and in fact we had to get Palestine to join it. Of course, I knew someone in the board of EONS, and we said, well, Israel are part of it, and they certainly use the resources. Why can't Palestine? And pleasingly they said, yeah. I must say the Israelis weren't happy with this. The idea that they go away at weekends and they go away to conferences, and you kind of talk about the challenges in your country with delivering cancer, and sure, we've got lots of challenges here delivering cancer care. They go around the table, Spain, Estonia, France, Germany, and they all talk about the challenges and its resources, mostly, training as well. But for the Israelis, for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, delegates there, you're the barrier. Israeli occupation is the barrier. So that was a wonderful learning experience actually for the rest of Europe. To see here are nurses saying, we have our challenges of that. Glasgow is twin with Bethlehem. Most of you know that. Not a lot came out of that in the past. It's a useful thing. Some arts exchanges. So this was the first programme where Sadie Doherty, who was the provost at the time, we'll talk about Sadie a bit later, said, this kind of puts meat in the bones. We can invest in this. We can fund some of the training, which she did. I worked for Glasgow, and I presented to the board that I want to bring students over who are on the diploma to have their clinical experience. Presented to the board, and it was fine. Just one person objected mildly, but nothing more than that. It was fine. Bethlehem University, of course, involved, and there's lots of bureaucracy involved. MAP liked what we were doing. I knew some people from MAP, and MAP usually invests in wars, the outcomes of war, burns, women's health, child health, limb reconstruction. But in fact, that suits the Israeli occupation in some way, because it spends a lot of money and you don't grow the health in the economy, the health in the country. So MAP liked that, so they said, we will fund this, and this is a Palestine. Davy Heyman, kind of unusual to get him a picture in a bar. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, he's on tour just now. He's got his last 5 days of death of a salesman going on. Anyway, he's a pal, and he said, Gerry, he runs a humanitarian organisation that some of you might know called Spirit Aid. He said, we would like to help to fund some of the cost of this. Right, how do I move it on now? Right, so there we are. So MAP supported it. We had they announced 2016 that they were going to support the next generation of Palestinian cancer nurses, and Sadie, fantastic, comparing Sadie to the current Lord Provost of Glasgow, chalk and cheese. She flew the Palestinian flag. She went over there. She took a lot of flack from the pro-Zionist groups in Glasgow, and she stood firm. She said, well, we're trying to be other cities, and it doesn't seem to be an issue me going over. And she came over with her, and compared to the Provost now, who has hardly mentioned it. So Sadie came over. This was the launch of the diploma, and there's Sadie wearing her bling and her glasses to stop the reflection of the sun. And this was the launch of the diploma. It was a fantastic day. We wanted to make it a cultural event as well. Took over some pals who self-funded. These are the bagpipes there. Most of these, they didn't come from Scotland. Bagpipes are a big thing over in the West Bank, particularly Bethlehem, during the British mandate or the British occupation, which is more accurate. The Boy Scouts movement was, and it's still ongoing. You go through the streets of Bethlehem at night, in the evening, you hear the bagpipes playing. I went into a room one time, and they had a picture of the Queen up here. Bethlehem. Anyway, we had a wonderful, this is Maeve McKinnon, some of you might know her dad, Alan McKinnon, who was the chair of CND, and it was a fitting event. Sadie went down to the refugee camp. We played a football side, and the Israelis checked the tower is just over there, and they fired tear gas over, but it didn't put Sadie off. We went into a room, and then we went back. So this was the first cohort of students. That's Mary Mawat. There was a few other students who weren't there, so they were the first cohort of students. A fantastic bunch of people who I would, if I needed care, any type of care, cancer care, nursing care, I'd be delighted for that group of people to look after me. So then we had the graduation, and the subsequent Provost Eva Bolander, I think, came over. Good, she went over, didn't have the same understanding as Sadie has, didn't have the same passion, I don't think, but I do respect the fact that she went over for the launch of it. Yeah. We did other things as well. As part of the cancer nursing, there was obviously not everyone can do the diploma at the time, and other nurses wanted training. So we've had a couple of training days over the years. This was the first. We've had 2 conferences. First international conference on oncology and palliative care at Bethlehem University, and we used all of these people. I hasten to add, the diploma which was going on depended a lot on people from here helping, and it wasn't the days of Zoom. So myself and my colleagues, some from Scotland, some from England, had to go over. Delighted to say now we've had so many cohorts of students, they don't need us and they know more about cancer than we do, so they do the teaching, so it's a sustainable. Hopefully I still have our role to play. I went over to the West Bank twice last last year, but no, if you don't go over or if you denied entry, you can still do Zoom, but the nurses there who are all fantastically trained and able can do the teaching. So this was a conference we had, and again we get funding, we get support. This is unusual. This is we get money from the Green Brigade, which is the ultras organisation of Glasgow Celtic, and they've actually been very helpful for me in the exchange programmes, funding some of the students coming over, and they funded this. They gave us £4,000, so we didn't have to charge the students any money because it costs money, you know. But the Bethlehem University love to thank people who make any donations, and they're proud that they're not the isolated groups or country that they're portrayed at. You know, there's an international support network. But they asked me for a picture of an emblem of the Green Brigade, which is a skull with a kafaya, which I couldn't really show. I was tempted between King's College London and European Oncology Nursing Society, but we just made up one. We just made up the fans one because we couldn't really have a kafaya and a skull, you know. Although I was sorely tempted. So Eons is great. The students all use it, you know, who are on the diploma, and they get an opportunity not only to learn more, but to share their experiences of cancer care and the impact of the occupation that goes on in a brutal way. This was getting invited to Eons. This was down in the Marsden in London, the day that Palestine were invited to Eons. The eagle-eyed of you will know that flag's upside down, and that's Mariam, and this is my friend in the board who helped with Palestine become a member. This is a nurse, you know. This is just a random woman that came off the street and wanted to hold the flag. Nobody knows who she was, you know. She saw a flag, she saw a Palestinian flag and wanted a bit of it, you know. So this is the graduation, first graduation, great. All these guys have been over. Tamer's the most senior cancer nurse in Palestine and the West Bank, I would say, an advocate. I had him over. I didn't have him over, he had himself over, speaking at the World Lung Cancer Conference in Barcelona, making a keynote speech. Wow, you know, impressive guy, you know. And these two guys are buried in cancer training. They've both been, Jihad also came over to Barcelona, and Hawaii has been denied entry, lives in Hebron, so he can't come over on placement. But delighted somebody with less hair than me sat next to me for the picture anyway. So they always want to be kind to you, they want to share their culture, and Tamer and Hawaii wanted to take me to Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is after being on placement at Bethlehem, at Augustus Victoria. The students go on placement, and I assessed them, how they apply their skills and all that stuff. So they wanted to take me, so we went down to it's their culture, and they wanted to take me to the mosque, you know. Unsurprisingly, so I wasn't a Muslim, so the army didn't let me in, so we went for a coffee, and we were just leaving by Damascus Gate, which is in the Arab quarter of the old city, and we walked out and we saw a woman, the soldier giving the woman a hard time, and the guys told me they were giving her a hard time. They were saying, your son's in prison and you're going to beat him up, he's going to get raped or whatever like that. Yeah. So she had a stick and she tapped him on the shoulder with it, and he shot her, and we watched that in the chest, point blank range. They took us all in, they kept us for 2 hours, and we came back out, and lo and behold there was a knife there that the soldiers had thrown down to say they tried to stab her. So the guys were concerned about me, but that was their life. This is our life, this is how they were worried about me, you know. I mean, I was quite traumatised, I still am. But that's a daily event for them. Just innocent people being killed. So we've got the guys on placement. They've been over. There've been a succession of nurses coming over, make a great impression, a fantastic impression. They're all articulate as well, more articulate than me. They speak English. Training at Bethlehem University, and all the university is in English. All the case notes are written in English, and you discuss case discussions. So they all speak English very well. Yeah. This is Azmat in the middle, who was the only one. There was other ones over who hadn't given me his passport number the day before he was due to fly over, and I said, Asma, you can't come, HR needs your passport number, your ID number. So he sent it, and I said, well, if you send it now, you can come over. You can still come over, but you won't be able to go in placements. So he sent it over, and he got in placement, and HR got in touch with me 3 or 4 days later, because then he had to show them his ID card and photocopy it, and they said, Asma's IDs are different, he's got 2 passport numbers, what's going on? Who's the real Asma? And I said, and he was working with me, I said, Asma, I've got a phone call, what's going on? He said, Gerry, I was so worried, I knew my passport was coming that afternoon, I just made up a passport number for you, because I was worried I wouldn't get going, so I had to explain that to HR. But, this is another 2 guys who were over, Joseph and Rami, who have been over in placement. They stayed with us. I usually try and get them accommodation. I mean, if people are kind, saying, we can host them, but I want them to have their own space. They're so used to not having their own time and space, and they can do what they like, they can cook what they like, they can pray whenever they want, and they can do what they like. So I like having their own place, and they like that. But these 2 guys came over and stayed with us because we didn't have the money at the time. Anyway, they were great, but managed to get a front page in the Scotsman. Somebody contacted me, and these guys, I checked with them, and they were happy, and they were saying, it's misery here, they're nurses in occupied East Jerusalem, it's misery here, Palestine nurses tell of fear of Israel, hospitals say Glasgow was the safest place they've been. You don't hear that very often, do you? Glasgow is the safest place you've been, but compared to what these guys have to cope with in occupation, their workmates, there is really workmates who threaten them, and they live in fear that they're going to say the wrong word and they're going to be blacklisted or they're going to be attacked by settlers. I said, if you wear your nurse's uniform, he said, it makes no difference. Anyway, they are the only what they are frightened of. I came in, they were out late at night, and they're adults, but you still worry because you're there, and they didn't come in, and the room was empty, and that was all night. It was 7 o'clock. I thought they're still not in. And they'd been in the bedroom and whilst I was sleeping, and there was a mouse in the room in our flat, and they were scared of mice, so they went through to living them in the couch, So I said, they're not frightened of the IDF. They can handle settlers in IDF, but don't. Mice are a different. I've had a couple of doctors coming over in placement, and they're great. They make a really good impression. Anyway, Mark knew about the stuff I'm doing at Bethlehem University. They said, we've got a breast cancer programme in Gaza. We want to develop and improve breast cancer care specifically in Gaza. Would you come over as part of a group? And there was a couple of Glasgow people came over, some friends came over, some people from the UK. There was a group of about 6 of us going over. And before I went over, I've got a friend who some of you might know, YL, who's a Palestinian in Glasgow, and he kind of represents the Palestinian population in Glasgow. His wife Doa, who was in Gaza at the time, and they were friends online, they just spoke, and she said, can you bring me over some Celtic strips? I don't know how I got them through. I did manage to get them through. It meant I didn't have any other. I had 2 pair of pants and a t-shirt, and that was it. And I had all this gear. Anyway, I brought them over, and this is during the Great March. If you remember, where the Israelis were shooting people, killing people and shooting people. Anyway, the next day, I was there at the time, and they wore the ships the next day, and it was a cultural event. Go over to Gaza, and we were making a difference. There was, not us, but the Palestinian colleagues that we're working with, we were seeing improvements in outcomes in breast cancer just by making the right choices for treatment, not treating when there's no point in using expensive drugs, but you're not going to get much of an impact. So, and my colleague Abdul Al Hasso is a consultant at the Beats, and he's a great friend, and so he was the driver behind it. I was involved in teaching at the nursery, but he was the one that made the difference along with his Palestinian colleagues. But we have teaching sessions, and I work with them within the Gaza hospitals in Al Shifa and Nasser. And this was one of the days, and they have a seminar in the evening when you go over with Mark Medley for Palestine on a mission. So I said, I'll see you later at the seminar, but it's more a social event. There is some teaching going on, some presentations, and they said, no, we're not asked, we're not invited. Nurses don't get invited to these things. So I said, well, that needs to change, doesn't it? So I spoke to Andy, who works for MAP. He was the medical director of MAP. That's Andy there. He's a fantastic guy. He no longer works for Maps, he works for Ideals, they're called. This is the medical director. This is the director of hospitals at the time, Abdul Latif Al-Haq, his name is, and we used to see him at the end of meetings to say, this is what we found, does that fit in with your plans, does it sound okay? An influential and important figure for us to work alongside with. But anyway, he heard about the nurses not being invited. He probably knew about it, but anyway, so he invited them, and not only did he welcome them to the meeting, there was about 300, 200 people there. He got all the doctors to stand up and to applaud the nurses who were there and the contribution that they make. So he got it, that unless you've got a good trained, you get the best doctors, unless you've got good trained nurses, it's not going to work. You know, we've had conferences as well. I mentioned about Bethlehem. This is in Gaza. This is the first multidisciplinary. I was going to have a nurses conference because nurses don't get the training that the doctors did, but then once they heard about it, the doctors said, well, we want involved in that as well, which is fine. So we got Professional Nurses Day. This is in Gaza City, in one of the hospitals. That's Rasha, who works for MAP. That's Fikar, who's in the head of MAP in Gaza. She's out of Gaza she was out in Gaza just after October the 7th, so she's not been allowed back in, but she still manages Gaza MAP from Egypt. And there's a translator. We have a translator. They all speak English pretty well, but there's a translator just in case. But the translator told me that, Gerry, it's all sorted. I'll pick up your accent. I've watched Braveheart twice. I know exactly. You know, there's not a lot of scope in nursing for freedom and Sassenach, and I haven't had to use that term. This is the conference. This is a guy called Gerry O'Hare. I don't know, he's a Glasgow-based guy. After one mission I came back and I was down National Lane having a pint with my wife, and there was a guy in the corner with his pals who was getting hammered, basically, drinking, out having fags, and he was overheard me because it's just before the pandemic broke out and the people stopped going out, and he heard me. He's from Derry. I can't do the accent, but he was saying, you know, I've heard you talk about Gaza. I know what it's like to live under occupation, and he was cursing and swearing and this and that, you know. And he said, I've got a skill, and he said, I could help maybe. I thought, well, I didn't know, but he was completely, you know. He said, I think I could do something. I said, well, I'm a nurse, and if you can do that, and I didn't know what you were going to do. I mean, is he going to teach him how to smoke over there or something? I was thinking the racist in me, you know. And the bigot in me, I thought, I said, well, if you've got a skill, he said, what's your skill? He said, I'm a paediatric neurosurgeon. Well, he is. I'm a fucking paediatric neurosurgeon. And he is, and he's the top guy, probably top 5 guys in the world. Wow. He is remarkable. If you Google him, he does all this amazing work, and he's a great guy. He's a lovely guy. Anyway, he said, look, I'm drunk now, but meet me and we'll talk it through. So he goes over, he's been on neurosurgery missions, he's operated on kids over there, only one neurosurgeon over in Gaza, and he's still involved even though he's not over there. He's still getting pictures of kids with bullets in their heads, and he's giving them advice on how to manage it. So that's Rory. We're in the process before October 7th in the invasion of Gaza. We were twinning, we'd met with management, we were going to officially twin the Beatson, that you all know, and the Turkish Cancer Centre, only because Turkey paid for it. A fantastic cancer centre in mid-Gaza. It's not Gaza City, it's in mid-Gaza, between Khan Yunis and Gaza City, and a remarkable hospital. And I worked in it, I thought, this is what Gaza needs, you know. The infrastructure and the other cancer hospitals were awful, but this was, it was as good as anything here. And we had our conference. I was over just before October the 7th, the week before, or 2 weeks before, and I eventually got a cancer nurse conference, because it's great having the doctors there, multidisciplinary, but I want the nurses to be able to express what they think and what they feel and the challenges that they have. So they were all in October the week before, and we were getting the nurses and Mariam, and they weren't allowed into Gaza, the nurses, but they were able to teach online. But within weeks of October the 7th, the same nurses were sending me pictures, telling me they're working in the cancer hospital. The Turkish hospital you saw, it's been bombed just now. They're looking after their patients, you know. Their families have been killed and bombed, and their patients are being killed. And they said people can't know about this, otherwise it wouldn't be allowed to happen. This is the Turkish hospital as it was then. Rory and Abdullah, myself, and our Palestinian colleagues, and the Israelis occupied the cancer hospital because it's a nice hospital and there's showers and nice rooms. And they took it over and they destroyed it. Even that doesn't exist. You might have seen it a couple of weeks ago or a month or two ago. They said there was Hamas fighters, but they occupied it. They detonated bombs underneath it so that nothing exists, so that there's no history of healthcare, and that's what they want to do, and that's what they've been allowed to do from the start. I mentioned Abdul Latif, who's the head of hospitals, and he had daughters who actually turned up in Glasgow. YL was supposed to arranging accommodation. She was a student at Glasgow University doing a master's programme, her and her pal Nagam, and they turned up and they'd nowhere to stay. Their accommodation had fallen through, which I don't think there's actually. Palestinians can't always book things because they don't know that they're going to get anywhere. You know, it's difficult to arrange anything if you're Palestinian because you don't know if you're going to get out of the country, so you don't want to go. Anyway, we took them in. They took them in for a couple of months, you know, and looked after them, and they were great fun. I mean, this is Abdul Latif's daughter there, and just her smile lit up the room. She walked into the room and she was just amazing, you know. But some of you might know that Abdul Latif and his family's home were bombed in November the 7th, 2023. It was a targeted attack. I've been in the home. Abdul Latif's a senior health person in Gaza. That's exactly the type of people they want to target. Abdul Latif and his wife were at work. They're both doctors, and they bombed, and they took in all the family because it wasn't in Gaza City. Both sides of the family, 50 members of them, and they were all killed. There was a targeted attack to try and kill Abdul Latif, and these people don't look like Hamas fighters to me. And it wasn't. It was a family home. I've been in the house. It wasn't anywhere near any infrastructure, and they killed them all, with the exception of his daughter and his two grandchildren, one of whom's brain damaged. Roddy's been given support for that, and yet Abdul Latif keeps in touch. Messaged me in June the 4th last year, said this would have been Dima's birthday, and it was coincided with a demonstration. Greetings from I and my wife and all the Glasgow people and the brave Scottish people who are protesting. This is Dima, who's a doctor who came over a couple of years ago from Bethlehem. Her mum's a teacher at Bethlehem University, who I know well, so I got a placement for her, and she's back over just now. In fact, had her in placement for 6 weeks in Glasgow, and she's down in England for a bit, but a reasonable chance that she might get a job, which is quite unusual, but she's very good and she's very talented, you know. She's a junior doctor. But sometimes when I'm going to demonstrate, I'm trying to speak in behalf of Palestinians. I feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I feel it's a waste of time, to be quite honest with you. I feel despair. 2.5 years of this, and still it goes on, and nothing seems to matter. Anyway, she said, Gerry, you keep on demonstrating, and she wrote that she's to try and encourage people, myself and others. I'm writing this letter whilst my hand is shaking and my heart is shattered. I'm really lost in this immense grief that will eventually swallow every jot of hope from every Palestinian soul if this genocide against us won't stop. However, I can assure every free soul around the world that we Palestinians see you, and your solidarity is the only hope that is left for us. So keep our flag flying high because we can't, keep our kafaya around your neck because we can't, and keep chanting our name so we are not erased. You are our voice because our cords are cut. You are our backbone because our bones are broken, and you are our last ignited candle. So make it everlasting. So I do feel despair, but if in doubt, I just ask my Palestinian friends, whether it be placements or whatever, or teaching, or even demonstration, or any press stuff that I might be asked to do or ask them to do. And this is a poem I came across. I don't know if you came across this, but it's kind of encapsulated everything really. Injustice to health workers, and it was a poem by I think it's an Australian poet, Berry, short poem, Because of Us. This morning I learned the English word gauze, finely woven medical cloth, comes from the Arabic word Gaza, because Gazans have been skilled weavers for centuries. I wondered then how many of our wounds have been dressed because of them, and how many of theirs have been left open because of us. The last slide, really, I don't know if this will work. At the end of any mission, you go out for a coffee with your MAP people and you just you just discuss it. And I went to a cafe in Gaza City, we're upstairs having a coffee, and these kids came in from school and just invaded the place, because it was a wee area, and they brought their instruments. There's sound on this, but you won't get it. And they brought their instruments and they just spontaneously started dancing. It was just brilliant. But I think, how many of these kids have lost their parents, have lost their lives, have lost their limbs? More children killed in the last 6 months in Gaza than all of the world wars in the last 20 years, times 4. What I want to share with you, that we've got 4 Palestinian nurses. We had a hiatus in the nurses coming over because of the pandemic and various other issues, but we've got it up and running. And 16th, we've got 4 Palestinian nurses coming over on placement. We'll have another 3 coming over in September. We thankfully have been given funding from your union, your trade unions. Here, I came here a couple of months ago. I gave a presentation, and we're making Jim Lister, who you know, Jim and Robert from Carlton Books, have been great. I wish I'd got them on tour before. I've been involved in this in a while, and you just kind of forge ahead. But having them on board just to help and support has been great. So we'll have the nurses over. They'll be in placement. They'll make a great impression. They'll share with the nurses and the patients and the doctors their experience of occupation, and they'll hopefully leave here being better nurses, being able to manage their patients better. Thanks.
Well, thanks very much, Gerry. Now, before we go, is there anybody who would like to ask Gerry any questions?
Anita's
Anybody on Zoom?
Anita.
Anita.
Can you hear me?
Aye.
Hello, okay. Gerry, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. Very informative, but also very moving. With your permission, would you allow us to have some copies of the maps at the very beginning?
Of
because
course.
sometimes infographics can teach us in an immediate way that it isn't possible with words.
Yep, of course, I will.
Those are quite useful.
I'll extract more than that. I'll extract a few pictures. I don't like sharing pictures of necessarily people who have been lost their lives without asking permission, but I'll extract the rest of the pictures. And please, and I'll be.
Yes.
Irene, it's yourself that emailed me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'll send them on to Irene, and she can share it with the group.
Thank you very much.
And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not denigrating the rest of what you said at all.
Sure.
I just think that those maps
course it
are
is.
simple
It is.
and
It is.
very, very good.
I agree.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, is there anybody else? Anybody else want to say anything? Yes, Linda.
Just briefly, the preliminary agenda for the Unite National Conference is out, and there's 17 motions in that preliminary agenda asking for support for Palestine, and they come from, well, our own Scottish region is one of them, and they come from branches and regions. So it just shows you in Unite that they could have put motions in any other subject. People still feel extremely strongly about this and want to support Palestine. So.
I should have said Jim has a leaflet that kind of encompasses the nursing programme, and if you know anyone who is in a position to be able to donate a small amount of money, I'll get Jim to circulate that as well, because almost if somebody was to offer me all of the money, which hasn't happened, having small donation from lots of people is better. I can share with the nurses and Mary Mawad that this isn't just one single benefactor, which is great, but there is a groundswell of people who want to support a programme like this, which is based in Glasgow, they can meet. I've arranged the student. There'll be a day where the students will come and they'll meet the branch members, and they'll explain their lives under occupation.
Dave's got his hand up. And
Just a brief thing. As a Celtic supporter, I feel a great pride for what Green Brigade have been doing with Gaza.
Yeah, I think it's
And
true.
I only
Yeah.
wish other clubs in Scotland would do the same.
Well, you know they're making a difference to try and quiet them and try and silence them down and try and denigrate them. You know they're doing something. You know, it's the same with the hip hop band Kneecap. You've got British sending weapons killing children. They focus on a line of one of their songs that was taken out of context. It's just, you know, it's just awful.
Jay, just so you know, I can see people you can't see. Dave Sherry.
No, the only thing is we can't keep
Right,
on asking
okay,
questions.
right,
Now,
okay.
Does Dave Sherry want to come in?
And then Joe's got his hand
And
up.
then Joe. And that's
Yeah,
it.
I mean, can you hear me okay?
Aye.
Yeah.
Right, unfortunately, says Jake. Aye, listen, thank you very much for the speech. As well as Celtic, there's other football clubs around the world that will bail. What I was thinking that we're all members, or were once members of other Unite branches, and I think we should maybe take it on ourselves to ask, mention that we've had this presentation, we're really impressed by it, it's quite important. Maybe they're in a better position. I mean, you'll make a donation, I hope, but they'll be in an even better position than us to make donations and support.
Sure.
So I suggest the branch committee try and organise that after the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks
Well,
for
without
that. Dave.
any further ado as well, I'm going to send this hat around and ask for a collection for all members that are present. Okay?
Joe, did you want to say something?
There's a lot of different types of cancer, you know.
Do you want to just pass it around and I'll close it?
Genetic cancer, heredity, you know, it's a complicated thing, you know. But is there anything like that in Palestine?
Palestine, no. I mean, what looking for briefly. I mean, the deaths and the murders in Gaza are the tip of the iceberg. What we're going to see in the future. All of these buildings were built in the 50s. They've all got asbestos in them. You know, they're crumbled. They're dust. So we're going to be looking, as your members were, we'll be looking at men, women, and children developing mesothelioma, amongst other terrible diseases, typhoid, polio. So the aim of the invasion isn't just to kill whoever's killed already, is to cause a human catastrophe for the coming years, and that's what we're looking at.
Well, Gerry, we want to say
Thank you.
But one of the points you did raise there, though, was that you'll be speaking to Jim Lister. You'll be speaking to Jim Lister.
Yes.
Well, as this branch, just recently, we met his branch.
Right.
And we met the hospitality branch.
Uh-huh.
So the three of us have met, and hopefully
Well,
that's the forerunner for quite a few of the other meetings.
Other events, I've had donations from the hospitality
Yes.
branch and from Jim's branch, you know, and I'm really grateful, and I've shared that with Mariam, and she's written to the
All the
group.
best of luck to you.
Okay then, folks, thanks.
Thank you very much.